I will now pass the mic to Natalia, or I can just do this to introduce our first reader, Shawn Shiflett. As always, please mute your audio. Shawn Shiflett is an associate professor in the English and Creative Writing Department at Columbia College, Chicago. His debut novel, Hidden Place, received rave reviews from newspapers, literary magazines, and Connie Martinson Talks Books. Library Journal included Hidden Place in Summer High's Fall Firsts, a 2004 list of most successful debuts. He was awarded an Illinois Arts Council Fellowship for his work and was a 3-time finalist for the James Novel in Progress contest, sponsored by the Heekin Group Foundation. New City newspaper elected Shiflett to their Chicago Lit 50 list, an annual ranking of top figures in the Chicago literary scene. His essay, The Importance of Reading to Your Writing, was published in 2013. His novel, Hey Liberal, a story about a white boy going to a predominantly African-American high school in Chicago during the late 1960s, has received acclaim from Booklist, the Chicago Tribune, Kirkus Review, New City Lit, Windy City Review, Mary Mitchell, Rick Cogan, and others. Shawn Shiflett's bio is pretty long, so I'm going to stop right there and ask you, if you are interested further, to check his website at shawnshiflett.com. Please welcome Shawn Shiflett.
Ignatius, I'm gonna, as soon as I get out of here, I'm gonna cut that bio.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds impressive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I thank you, Natalia, for asking me to read. You know, we were at the Shake Rag Alley Writers Retreat, and when you had to leave early, I was like, oh, there goes this kind of calm strength out of my semicircle. But I'm really glad that we still are in touch. You're having me here. It's a wonderful thing to say you've been going for 20 years. All of you, that's Nita and Jeanie. That's really, really something to be proud of, the staying power of a reading. I'm going to read from Hey Liberal just because it's been so long. I stopped reading from it for some reason. I'm working on a book of dreams. I might get to a dream later. But this is from chapter 3. It's about a white kid, Simon Fleming, whose dad was in civil rights as a minister. And he's been sent to this predominantly Black high school shortly after the King riots, sort of as a political statement that this is where he wants his son to go to school. So the school has just been convulsed with riots the year before. It's white population, student population is just dove from say 40% down to 13%. And he's just trying to navigate his way through the situation. And this chapter is called Honky Love. Okay? With music class and algebra under his belt, Simon weaved down a crowded second-floor hallway in the new building on his way to English. An overload of on-the-go conversations echoed off beige metal lockers and the tall, arched ceiling. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. Hey, Simon. He whipped around, and there was Dia, cradling a stack of books in her arms. Petite and doe-eyed, if she had tipped forward, she would have kissed him no higher than his sternum. You walked right by me. There was a pause during which Simon almost swan-dived into her affectionately exclusive gaze, lost contact with time and space, and then reeled himself back in. Hi. Well, aren't you the shy one? Are you going to walk me to my world history class? It was as if Dia, who had recently begun to single him out for special attention between classes in the hallways, felt that being white at Dexter were no more than an occasional inconvenience, probably because she attended honors classes enrolled primarily with middle-class students who came from the better grade schools in the district. Simon, one of the few whites tracked in regular classes, thought of honor students as members of an exclusive club. He watched these so-called gifted kids on the sly, small clutches of them in the hallways or at the lunchroom table. The girls wore tight miniskirts with white blouses. The guys button-down collar shirts with the tails hanging out of their bell-bottom pants. They were cool, of a dying breed at Dexter, and by Simon's reckoning, off limits. I really don't, I've got to get a slap on Simon's shoulder packed a playful sting. I'm more important than risking a stupid tardy slip, aren't I? The girl's bold, pouty gamemanship left him no option. Shit. He gently took hold of her arm just above the elbow and began escorting her down the hall. Within only a few steps, he felt a peculiar pride ballooning in his chest, gliding him forward. A trip up a flight of stairs later, they came to a stop at a classroom doorway. Letting go of her, he realized that his palm had left a sweaty imprint on her cotton sleeve. Now what? As a couple of students filed past them into Dia's world history classroom, she seemed to be counting on him to jumpstart the conversation again. But all he could think to do was reach up and self-consciously brush his fingers through the wavy dip of hair on his forehead that never, when things really counted, behaved. So, Dia finally said, how'd you end up in this lovely dump? Under pressure to impress, Simon simplified the complicated. I used to live on the far northwest side. You know, everyone's white and lives in rinky-dink subdivision houses. My dad's a Presbyterian minister and, he got involved in the civil rights movement and thrown in jail in Albany, Georgia, with a bunch of other northern clergymen. They went on this 6-day hunger strike, to keep protesting Jim Crow's laws and all that jazz. Then he came home skinny as hell, pissed off a lot of people in his congregation. So last year he quit and we moved here. Now he owns the Body Politic Theater. Interesting. Simon rolled his eyes, blowing it. Then, horrified that Dia might take his eye rolling as an opinion of her, he rambled on about the other freedom marches his father had gone on, Montgomery, Washington, D.C., where King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And as Dia listened, she snagged a piece of lint off his tan V-neck sweater, then rested her hand for a moment on one of his belt loops, touching, always touching, but with the nonchalance of someone oblivious to her own effect. Wow, she said, that's stuff you can tell your kids someday. He looked away, then straight down and scuffed the sole of his gym shoe against the checkered maroon and black tile floor. Dia sing-songed, you're blushing. Am not. Yep. Will you stop? Simon reached up and shook his fist. Ugh. Dia was already giggling. It's okay. She rested her hand tenderly against his chest and let it linger for a moment before sliding it down, her index finger speed bumping on shirt buttons underneath his sweater. Just means you're sweet. Simon's prick stirred in his Fruit of the Loom briefs. Great. The last thing he needed was a boner. Desperate for a distraction, he asked, say, do you know a kid named Lewis Collins? Now it was Dia's turn to roll her eyes. Yeah, I know him. A real nutcase. Why do you ask? Simon quickly told her about Lewis ditching music class via the window. Funny as all shit. I bet Mr. Egan's still having a stroke. Yeah, that's Lewis all right. Mr. Drama, Dia said. He used to go steady with my best friend, Gail. But then last summer he changes overnight from being a kid whose idea of fun is solving calculus problems on his slide rule to someone who smokes or pops every drug he can get his hands on. Gail says he even tried smoking catnip. Catnip, Simon asked. Gets people high too? Not unless you sprout long whiskers and start eating mice, she assured him. One day the doorbell rings at Gail's house. Good thing she opens the front door instead of her mom or dad, because there's Lewis on the porch wearing nothing but a blue and gold striped tie, his underwear, and construction boots. Yuck, right? He rode there on his 10-speed, and it's late November, not exactly tanning weather. He shoves a bouquet of wilted red roses in her face and says, will you marry me? The next day at school, he's got the nerve to come up to her in the lunchroom and ask, why, just slam the door in my face, bitch. Got to the point where she wasn't sure what the wacko would do next, kiss her, stalk her, or spike her orange juice with LSD. So she talked her parents into letting her go live with her aunt and uncle in San Francisco. Sounds fucked up, Simon said, trying to sound mature. What's his problem? Don't know. Maybe he smoked too much catnip? But I did hear something about his dad getting killed a few years back. Car accident? Not sure, really. Come to think of it, someone mentioned Lewis's dad was a preacher too. Then he's a PK, preacher's kid, just like me. PK, PB&J, whatever. Dia gave a dismissive wave. All I know is the boy's definitely bonkers. Take my advice, Simon. He's nothing but a walking piece of bad news. Simon was about to change the subject and ask Dia if she'd heard about the Community Boycott Coalition's list of demands or Mr. Lang's involvement in organizing a student boycott. He wanted to feel her out as one white to another, to see if she shared his fear that any political rocking the boat at Dexter would quickly escalate and spiral into a replay of last year's riots. But before he could get a word in edgewise, she told him, "You have freaky eyes." Really? He gave her the benefit of the doubt and assumed freaky was a compliment. And I suppose you're going to tell me you don't know you're one of the cutest boys at Dexter? Simon felt his already overheated face deepen a few more shades of red, a reaction that pleased Dia enough to make her giggle again. She asked, "Are you going to walk me to my classes from now on?" For what? Simon, aware that he had just blundered, thought, "Because she likes you, idiot." Not far away, a couple of black girls reached the top of the nearby staircase, and as they lollygagged through a crowded hallway intersection, one told the other, "I ain't lying, Sheila says she's pregnant." Or maybe it's true what I've heard about you, Dia said, that you're stuck up. Me? I'm not. Prove it. Dia's tactic was about to work like a charm on Simon when three Latino gangbangers came out of nowhere and stepped between them. "Excuse me," the one in the middle said to Simon. Though the boy was short enough to qualify for a Napoleonic complex, his peach fuzz mustache compensated him with a pubescent dash of manhood. "You don't mind if I interrupt, do you?" The flash on his smile drove home the message. Beat it. He and his taller buddies flanking him wore long black knit cardigans with gold bands circling the shoulders, signature sweaters of the Latin Kings. Just the week before, members of that club had shot and killed a Dexter student who was part of the rival Harrison Gents in a drive-by on Halstead Street. Kings did that sometimes, killed people. The beefy one on the left ran his eyes slowly up and down Simon. Then he shook his head sadly, the white boy failing inspection. "Do you?" the middle king repeated, dropping all pretense of a smile. After a moment in which Simon showed neither the sense to retreat nor the balls to object, all three gangbangers about faced so that he had nothing but the wall of their backs to stare at. "Say, baby, your name?" Dia, eye level with her new admirer, didn't miss a beat. "Who wants to know?" "Hector, baby. I think you're a fine-ass mamacita. What say you and me?" "My name," Dia said, sweet as punch, "is Goodbye." And with that, she ducked inside her world history classroom, just as the bell rang. The king on the right laughed. "Put you low." Narrow in the shoulders and extra long everywhere else, he slapped five with his stout friend. They found Hector's blown attempt to lay the rap so hilarious they'd gone all wobbly. "Puta," Hector spat. Then he spun around, fist ready to strike, but the maricon white boy had vanished. At the other end of the corridor, a hall monitor clapped her hands and shouted at stragglers, "Let's move it, people." The end of that, most of the chapter. I'm going to finish. I'm working on we're going to really shift gears now, okay? And I'm working on a collection of dreams called My Secret Lives. I've been working on it for a while. And since many of you are from the north of Chicago there, this is a dream I had where I was in Evanston, and there's a mention of Hey Liberal, the novel, in it. So the dream, and I have about 70 dreams at this point, is called Strawberries. At a courtyard farmer's market in the city of Evanston, my urologist is with me, and as we stroll from produce stall to produce stall, I'm complaining to him that I just can't seem to find the time to finish my novel, Hey Liberal. He patiently hears me out and then says, "Look, You've already finished that novel. You've finished and published 2 novels, and your dad is very proud of you. I think, oh yeah, how could I forget? And that my dad is proud of me is especially good news, as he died only a few months earlier. A heavy weight has been lifted off my soul, and I start toward the wrought iron gated entrance to the market, intending to walk to the Dempster Street L stop. From there, I'll take a quick train ride home to the Lincoln Park neighborhood in Chicago. Some youths, skateboarders by the looks of their ripped baggy jeans and oversized sweaters, see me coming toward their stall and start whipping strawberries at me. With an athleticism that I haven't possessed in decades, I twist, dive, lunge, spin, fall to the ground, and still manage to snag each and every strawberry with my sure ambidextrous hands. Finally, the boys give up trying to make me miss one and stop. Had enough? I say victoriously. Dickhead, one of the punks says. Sore losers? I pick myself up off the ground. You got a problem? Just then, the wrought iron gate clanged shut of its own accord. So much for an escape route. One of the youths nods in the direction of a corner where a man dressed in little more than stitched together rags sits huddled in the shadows of the courtyard's brick walls. Get him, Ernest, says the youth. The man heaves himself to his feet. He is beyond large. He is, in fact, huge, with a peasant's build of rounded shoulders and almost no neck. His dirt-streaked and deeply lined face must undoubtedly be the result of prolonged poverty. In his hand is a spatula that he keeps slapping against his palm in the same manner that a cop might slap with his billy club to signal that he's losing patience. I'm in a tight spot. It's perfectly clear that Ernest intends to beat me to death with his spatula. Here he comes. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Shawn, thank you so much. And that was really wonderful. And I wanted to mention that I met Shawn at the sort of writer's retreat that he runs with a few other people. And I had to leave because there was this, for several reasons. I got a bad stomach flu, and I would have stayed, except that was the weekend of it. I don't know if you guys remember, there was like a freak snowstorm. And I just kind of panicked, and I was like, I'm going to die here in the middle of Wisconsin. I better leave. And so it took me like 4 hours to drive home. So that was I'm going to try one day again, but not, I couldn't quite do it this year. Anyway, thank you so much. And our next reader is Jeanie Chung. And so let me get the bio. Jeanie Chung's fiction, essays, and author interviews have appeared in Upstreet, Numero 5, The Writer's Chronicle, and elsewhere. She works as a development writer at the University of Chicago and was a sports writer in a previous professional life. And for those of you who don't know, there have been 2 iterations of Sunday Salon Chicago. The first was begun by 2 friends of Nita, who's here tonight, Mike Zapata and Melanie Farinello. Then I think it kind of went on hiatus. So Jeanie and I were responsible for this second version of it, iteration of it. And Jeanie is wonderful to work with. I always appreciate what she's done. And I'm just so very glad that she's here. So Jeanie, it's all yours now.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for that lovely introduction. I'm, of course, a huge fan of Sunday Salon, and thank you to Natalia and Ignatius and Betsy, and to all of you guys for tuning in. So I think I have time to do 3 things. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read a poem by Mitsuya Yamada, who is a Japanese American badass feminist poet, going to turn 98 next week. And she was, as a teenager, she and her family, they were interned in Minidoka, the internment camp during World War II. So this poem, it's short. It's called The Question of Loyalty. I met the deadline for alien registration once before, was numbered, fingerprinted, and ordered not to travel without permit. But alien still, they said I must forswear allegiance to the emperor. For me, that was easy. I didn't even know him, but my mother, who did, cried out, if I sign this, what will I be? I'm doubly loyal to my American children and also to my own people. How can double mean nothing? I wish no one to lose this war. Everyone does. I was poor at math. I signed my only ticket out. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read an essay that actually a few of you guys have read before. I'm normally a fiction writer, but I have a handful of nonfiction pieces, and Natalia thought this would be a good thing to read, so I'm going to read it. It's called Cuts and Folds. So here goes. Blepharoplasty comes from the Greek words blepharo, which means eyelid, and plasty, which means shaping. It's so nice to have a mother who can help out with the troop for an afternoon, the Browning leader says. And what an interesting activity, origami. The girls don't have many activities to make crafts from other cultures. Origami is funny though. It can get confusing if you're not careful. You fold and unfold, turn the paper sideways, over, upside down. It's so easy to get all jumbled up, disoriented. No, honey, my teacher would say, interrupting me in the middle of drawing my hair, taking the yellow crayon out of my hand and using it to make an oval for my face. You're supposed to draw you. Blepharoplasty comes from the Greek words blepharo, which means eyelid, and plasty, which means shaping, or intense searing pain in the service of beauty. But pride must suffer pain. It's also called Asian eyelid surgery. Much simpler. It says exactly what the problem is and how to fix it, like wart removal. What I didn't know then was that according to Japanese legend, if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, your heart's desire will come true. It's too expensive, my dad says. When you become a doctor, my mom says, smiling, you'll know lots of other doctors and one of them will be able to do it for you for free. The important thing is to start with a crease. That's where you put the dark eyeshadow when your face heals. Once they've made the crease, they cut off some fat. They call it subcutaneous, which means under the skin, and some muscle. This tissue is the epicanthic fold, meaning extra skin that makes your eyes slanted. Removing it involves an incision just above the lashes so they won't be hanging under the skin anymore. More teeny tiny stitches close the wound. It takes about an hour. There's another way where they sort of sew the eyelid into place without any cutting. Then there are some people, women mostly, who just use special glue and this little fork to mold their eyelids into place every morning. What a pain. There are pictures. A red angry line runs below the eye socket bone. Then glistening, what is it? Fat, muscle, subcutaneum? Is that even a word? Above the lashes where the doctor tightens up the eyelid. The naked glistening tissue where the fat and muscle have been removed isn't gross at all. Have you ever seen a picture of a cocoon right before it opens, the way it's all wet and glossy and shot through with veins? That's what the photos remind me of, or of a baby being born. Kind of goopy, sure, but shiny and brave with new life. Then the stitches. From the picture, you'd think someone hit the girl in each eye with a bottle. Well, pride must suffer pain. There are slightly different styles of origami cranes, but in general, a crane has its wings extended as if it were flying. Other than that, though, it looks kind of like a swan. Of course, the most famous swan might be the ugly duckling. He had big feet, his head was too big, his eyes were shaped funny, but then he grew up to be a beautiful swan. All he had to do was give it time. That story is supposed to make girls like me feel better. My friends and I start wearing makeup on a regular basis in 6th grade. The magazines tell us to put the darkest shade of eyeshadow, quote, in the crease of the eyelid. They have creases. All I have is a shallow dip. Huh, my friends ask each other, what's she supposed to do now? But they don't have any answers. They let me stand at the mirror and let me try to figure it out, giving me just a tiny bit more room at the mirror, than they did before. Watching as I try to contour my eye by wiping a dark smear across my flat eyelid. They've never seen anything like it before, not up close like that. How will they insult me properly if they can no longer pull their eyes into slants? I'll still look different enough. There was the girl in 5th grade when I was in 4th who called me the N-word. Kids are creative that way. They've never seen anything like it before, not up close like that. All the girls want to look like Farrah Fawcett. The only Asian woman you see speaking English on TV is the lady on the laundry commercial who declares, full of pride, ancient Chinese secret. No one thinks of her as pretty, though she probably is. But Asian girls aren't pretty, are they? With the slanty eyes and all? Of course, origami isn't Korean. But when my mom was in school, she and her friends spoke Japanese. They learned Japanese history. They even learned Japanese paper art. My mom never learned how to be a proud little Korean girl either. They say it'll hurt. Please. Someone cuts off some skin and sticks a needle in my eyelid a couple times. So what? Plenty of things hurt more. What I didn't know then was that, according to Japanese legend, if you fold 1,000 paper crayons, your heart's desire will come true. And if I knew, I'd have said, what's folded can be unfolded. To change something, you have to cut. Everyone tells me to be happy with who I am, that I'm beautiful on the inside. And isn't that what's important? You know how sometimes you keep staring and staring at your face in the mirror and you notice every pore and every bump and every freckle, like standing really close to a pointillist painting? After a while, you can't tell what's beautiful, what's ugly. You can't tell what's you. You're no longer there. My parents actually think doctors do free surgeries for their friends. They don't know anything about this country. When the surgeon pulls off the extra skin, if he keeps pulls hard enough on the eyelids, I wonder if he could turn someone all the way inside out, upside down. And if he did, I wonder what he'd see. Me, I hate origami, but then I never was much of an artist. In my first pictures, standard kindergartner scribblings of a family and pointy-roofed house underneath an orange spider-legged sun, I'd give myself blonde hair and blue eyes. No, honey, my teacher would say, interrupting me in the middle of drawing my hair, taking the yellow crayon out of my hand and using it to make an oval for my face. You're supposed to draw you. That same guy who wrote The Ugly Duckling, Hans Christian Andersen, wrote The Little Mermaid. The mermaid wanted to be like people, like regular people, and so she had a witch get rid of her tail, cut it into 2 legs. And with every step, it was as if she were walking on knives, but it was worth it. She said, pride must suffer pain. My parents don't ask, what is the matter with the way you look now? You don't think you're beautiful? Can't blame them, I guess. Why should they be the first? What I didn't know then was that according to Japanese legend, if you fold 1,000 paper crayons, your heart's desire will come true. And if I knew, I'd have said, what's folded can be unfolded. To change something, you have to cut. It's easy to change something like your eyes or your hair or your legs or your stomach or anything about the way you look. But your heart's desire deep down, that won't ever change. In the end, I didn't do it because it's easy to change something like your eyes or your hair or your legs or your stomach or anything else about the way you look. But your heart's desire deep down, that won't ever change. And so the third thing I want to do is that I just want to say that despite the 2 things I just read, I really would, and I, at the risk of like insulting anybody's intelligence, I really, Natalia, we had talked about sort of highlighting Asian voices. And I really want to encourage you all to understand, and I'm sure you do, that we are more than our trauma, and any marginalized group is more than, about racial trauma and, injustice. And that I encourage you to seek out Asian writers on a regular basis, who talk about more than just that, including, Nita and I. And yeah, read more Asian writers. Thanks.
Jeanie, thank you so much. it's so great to have you here. So thank you. Our next writer is Nita Noveno, and she was the founder of this series, which began in New York City, I think 19 years ago. But Nita, you can correct me when you before you begin reading. So let me get your bio. Nita Noveno teaches composition and literature at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, City University of New York. She is a graduate of the New School MFA Creative Writing Program and the founder and host of the Sunday Salon reading series in its 19th year in New York City and online. She is also the founder and editor of the literary journal Salon Sein, and her work has appeared most recently in The Hunger and the Asian American Writers Workshops Open City. Originally from Southeast Alaska, she lives in Queens, New York, and writes about memory, culture, identity, and immigrant lives. Nita, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Natalia and Ignatius. So wonderful to finally be here, Sunday Salon Chicago. I've thought about it over the years. It'd be nice to visit these guys in Chicago, and okay, so this is maybe not the ideal, but I'm totally honored, and it's great to read with Shawn and Jeanie and Aviya. So thank you so much. Yes, it's been 19 years this year. And I was telling Natalia and Ignatius earlier that I'm on sabbatical this year. So I've got a friend who's going to be continuing it in virtually. So I'm happy it's continuing while I'm on sabbatical, but I'm happier I'll be on sabbatical. I apologize in advance because I'm having like Wi-Fi technical issues. So if I
you sound great.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
you sound great.
There are moments where I heard people, but they froze for a little bit, or they just sounded funny. So stick with me. Thank you. All right. I'm going to read from my manuscript in progress. And this is a chapter called Gathering, 1973. It's a pig again. Last summer, it was a goat led by a rope around its neck. I don't remember who held the knife then, but recall moments in the scene. A streak of silver across the throat, a gush of red pouring into a large bowl, the last gurgling cry. I turn away from the window to see my mother busy in the kitchen with the other women, chopping and frying, oil splattering, dishes covered in foil on the kitchen table. Preparation before celebration, a familiar scene in my Filipino community in Ketchikan, Alaska. The butchering committee stands in the front yard, voices directing and confident. An hour before noon, as the July sun climbs a cloudless sky, two pairs of hands hold down the jittery animal. Others watch with crossed arms, nodding and chatting, laughter rising high above the forest treetops. I peer out from behind the sheer curtains of the living room window. The men occupy our small lawn, the grass a bright summer green. A few feet away on the other side of the swing set where they've tied the animal stands a metal barrel used to burn my family's garbage. Small mounds of refuse stretching beyond it, a topographical map of scraps of tired magazines, plastic odds and ends, and whatever else metal and fireproof, remainders of old dreams and no longer of use. Today, though, the fire is burning elsewhere. Like the first time it happened, I run into my parents' bedroom closet and kneel under my father's hanging suits until the slaughter is over. My hands clapped over my ears so hard, creating an airtight seal, though I can still hear it, a ceaseless squealing that makes my heart beat faster. The closet smells of mothballs and my father's shined leather shoes. I stare into a dark corner. The pig's cries follow me there, haunting me like a ghost. Then silence. Here I remain for a few more minutes under the shelter of my father's suits and a history of survival I've yet to learn. I'm not alone. The Virgin Mary stands on top of a cabinet next to my father's closet. In a light blue robe and white head covering, she gazes down at me, smiling gently. A small brown serpent frozen in mid-glide by her feet. This statue gives me the creeps, and I'm scared of the dark and places where monsters hide and statues come to life to eat children. Slowly, I return to the living room, to business as usual in the kitchen. I dare myself to look out the window again, feel the goosebumps on my arms, even though I've seen this before. The gutted pig mounted whole on a metal pole, its legs wrapped tightly together with thick wire and roasting over an open fire in a fireplace my father constructed from stones and cement. The men of the committee, my uncles and my father, stand in shifts to turn the animal over the fire until its skin is charred, meat cooked to tenderness. One of them tousles my hair as I walk past. I circle the swing set where the animal had been tied earlier. Blood stains and smears an outcrop of rock and patches of grass. By mid-afternoon, the pig is displayed on the kitchen table with an apple wedged in its mouth. Soon after, it is partitioned like countries on a map and doled out from a serving tray. When the pig comes to the table in this form, absent of fur and eyes, motionless, silent, my sympathy fades. It is not the same animal, the sheen of its skin like plastic, yet out of something akin to respect for a dead pet, I refuse to eat the meat. You don't want to try? Asks one of my aunts. Not even a little bit? I shake my head. Instead, the crunchy skin of 1, 2, then 3 lumpias crumble in my mouth. Inside each of them is the savory union of shredded cabbage, carrots, and ground pork, prepared and rolled the night before in an aunt's kitchen. This pork I will eat. The staple mound of sticky white rice tempers the garlic and onion. I fork pancit noodles onto my plate too. When I return to the table, more dishes appear and I find myself immersed in the swirl of women's instructions in English as they speak amongst themselves in Ilocano and Tagalog. Nita, have more rice. Mangan, eat the tomatoes with bagoong. The green beans are good, try them. Ito'y ay may sarap. Don't be a picky eater. Picky. Maybe it's because my American tongue is winning. I would choose to eat hot dogs and spaghetti every day if I could, over fish head or tripe soup. Though the beef tongue sandwich my mother stuffs in my lunchbox, which passes for a thick slice of Oscar Mayer bologna, is delicious. Some things pass muster, others not. Soon, convenience makes its way into my diet. Oscar Mayer bologna replaces the beef tongue in my sandwiches for lunch. And when my mother gets her first job at a senior care facility, leaving us children to fend for ourselves in the kitchen, or reluctantly eat our father's cooking, I make my own frozen dinners. Not right now, though. Right now, I'm enjoying food made by strong, precious hands and taste tested to be masarap. These numerous aunts and uncles chatting and laughing, standing in the kitchen and sitting in the living room are not actual blood relatives, but that is how I address these older Filipinos who are close friends of the family. Many are ninongs and ninangs or godfathers and godmothers, but the English and Filipino titles are interchangeable in my mind. Uncles Pete, Eddie, Vincent, Mateo, and Joe, aunts Eleanor, Theodora, Priscilla, Anastasia, and Clara. They have children of their own. Those around my age play with my sister and me in the yard. Then we chase each other down the dirt road and hide behind the tall, broad patches of stinky skunk cabbage leaves on the roadside, like little creatures in Richard's scary storybooks, huckle cats, and lily worms on an adventure. In the front yard, the men relax with their plate of food or can of Rainier beer in hand. They talk of the salmon they've caught so far that season, of the rising cost of gasoline, of the latest news from relatives in the Philippines. My sister and I sit on the swings, bellies full, we rocket in the air, straightening our bodies like planks of wood, so our heads skim the grass on the downswing. Someone has hosed off the pig blood from the ground. Marcos is like a king now, remarks Uncle Pete. He's been president for 8 years, my dad exclaims. He works at the post office as a janitor and maintenance man during the week. On the weekend, he plays rummy with the uncles in the back room of the Diaz Cafe. He and Uncle Pete smoke cigars while Uncle Matt talks excitedly about the moves and footwork of Muhammad Ali. Matt was a boxer in the Philippines. I've seen a photograph of his younger self in boxing gloves and shiny shorts, a glimpse of youth, a fighter. All of these men around the table had to be. They play cards long into the night, surrounded by a thick wall of cigar smoke, its pungent, peppery odor filling every corner of the room. Dictator Marcos, Uncle Pete clarifies, in his third term. Aye, all of these politicians are corrupt, Uncle Matt observes. They just want to line their pockets, compadres. Yeah, but the roads are better. There's more electricity in the villages, my father claims, and more schools. That's all Marcos is doing. But there are no jobs, Matt argues. Families back home, still poor. And they're stealing the money we mail back home to family. You can't trust the post office. Not even the man's martial law will stop the thieves, Uncle Pete insists, waving away a mosquito from his ear. He lives in a trailer with his wife, my Aunt Eleanor, a white woman, and their chubby son, Pete Jr., who's a year younger than me. I listen to the committee's conversation as my sister and I continue our daring swings. Much of what they say about the Philippines escapes me. Martial law? Whatever it is, it doesn't sound at all that good. It is a country I barely know, and only then through my parents' photos. The soles of my feet kiss the sky. My sister swings harder. She's younger than me by 2 years and smaller than me by 5 inches, so she has to tiptoe to touch the ground. Her thin hair waves back and forth as she shoots upward, trying to meet my swing height. But I have stronger, longer legs and can pump more into my swings. I am winning this swinging contest. Oh, Filipinos will keep eating rice and butchering their pigs, Eddie declares. This uncle lives in the house next to ours. He invited my dad to build our house on his property. As long as we are fed, we're happy. Aye, look at us, Uncle Pete chides, mouth full. Sky, swing, grass, swing, dirt. We are not kings here, but we're better off, Matt surmises, even with the cold weather. A crow squawk rises from the middle of the forest. Sky, grass, dirt. Better watch out, my father warns. You might acquire a taste for the birds here too. Better to eat a bluebird than to be a jailbird, Pete says. Laughter floods the yard, then something else at the heels of this release. Relief, was it? Sadness? Sky, house. Next summer, my family and I board a gigantic Pan Am airplane that flies us across the Pacific Ocean to the Philippines. There, my sister and I wilt in a thick, suffocating heat and stare at people in flip-flops or bare feet crossing the streets flooded by monsoon rains. Our relatives so excited to see our parents, to meet their American-born children for the first time, butcher a pig and roast it to celebrate our arrival. Did I recognize this as a familiar scene then? No, they are all strangers and I am a stranger in a strange land. My sister and I yelp, then I complain, and then she complains because it's too hot, because the food tastes weird, because we can't sleep, because of the bugs. We've never seen cockroaches before. I return home from this trip, unaware of how memories can be stored to appear out of the blue in refractions, in rememories. 40 years later, at another pig roast, while visiting my aunt's village on the island of Mindanao, or during dinners with Filipino-American friends in New York City, my home of the last 26 years, mimicking our parents' accents, joking in puns, lamenting and growling about the current strongman president of the Philippines, whose nickname is the Punisher, and passing plates of roast pork and white rice around the table. Every feast and grief turned into connective tissue. But not yet. It's still 1973 and I'm a kid swinging higher and higher. Not my sister though. She's grown tired of this contest and comes to a full stop. I'm thirsty, she declares before darting across the lawn back into the house. I jump off the swing too and stroll towards the fireplace. The metal spit that once held the pig for this ritual of sacrifice and communion now lies bare atop the low stone walls. I lean over the fireless pit, feel the heat on my face, and blow gently on the smoldering briquettes. These cindery remains, gray-black lumps, flicker like bright orange gems, like a sudden burst of life, a resurrection under my breath. Thank you.
That was so beautiful, Nita, so beautiful, so moving. Thank you so much. It always feels like the evening goes by very quickly. We're on our last reader, who is a great prose writer and poet. Aviya Kushner. I will get her bio now. Aviya Kushner is the author of The Grammar of God, A Journey into the Words and Worlds of the Bible, which was a National Jewish Book Award finalist, a Sammy Rohr Prize for Jewish Literature finalist, and one of Publishers Weekly's top 10 religion stories of the year. She is also the author of Wolf, Lamb, Bomb, Orison Books 2021, a poetry collection deeply engaged with the Book of Isaiah and the poetry chapbook Eve and All the Wrong Men, Dancing Girl Press 2019. She is the Forward's language columnist and previously wrote a travel column for the International Jerusalem Post. Her work has been supported by the Howard Foundation, the Illinois Arts Council, and the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture. She has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize in Poetry. She is a member of the Third Coast Translators Collective and serves on the board of the American Literary Translators Association, as well as the Executive Committee in Nonfiction at the Modern Languages Association. So excited to have Aviya here. And I just want to mention that she very kindly gave me her new poetry book, Wolf, Lamb, Bomb. It's fantastic. Anyway, thank you so much to everybody for joining us. And now, Aviya, it's all yours.
Thank you, Natalia, for the beautiful introduction. And I just want to say how delighted I am to be here reading with all of you. It's been so wonderful to hear Shawn and Jeanie and Nita's work and to hear all of these different explorations of identity, culture, history, and language. And so it's just been a real honor and a pleasure to hear all of it. I just wanted to talk really briefly about Wolf Lamb Bomb and how it started and then get us in the mood. So this book started when I was in my early 20s. My grandfather, who I loved very much, died. And I noticed that in Jewish tradition, there is nothing for a grandchild to do. So close relatives are very busy saying Kaddish, sitting Shiva, etc. And grandchildren, like, nobody cares. And so I made up my own ritual. And I went to synagogue on time every week for a year. If you know me, you know I'm not a morning person. It's really hard for me to be punctual, let alone early. But my grandfather was a German Jew. He was super punctual. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be there super early and I'm going to be perfectly dressed just the way he was. And I'm going to honor him by doing that. And one of the things that, so I had the opportunity to hear the entire Torah read out loud. And because I was finishing poetry grad school, I was in a poetry state of mind. And I thought, hold on, Isaiah, forget prophet. He's a fantastic poet. He's a great poet. And I started to write poems back to Isaiah, to the book of Isaiah in Hebrew and in English. And I didn't know that I was going to be doing that for years and years and years. And now I think it was sort of a way for me to sort of hold on to my grandfather a little longer. So that's how the book began. And to get us in the mood, I'm going to read a poem about civilizations that are no longer around. It's one of the interesting things. It's been so interesting hearing all these pieces about various cultures and how alive they are. But I think one of the fascinating things about the ancient world is all the dead civilizations. Where do they go? What happens to them? So I'm going to read a poem called No One Knows What Happened to the Hittites. The Hittites are one of the great peoples who disappear. And I should say that I wrote this piece after being asked, I was asked to try and write a travel piece for the first time, and I agreed to do it on spec. And I went and I went and I looked at this archaeological dig and I talked to people, blah, blah, blah. And then when I came back, the editor said, you know, what about the mountains? So I didn't know that you were also supposed to write about the landscape other than what they sent you to do. So I had to go back and do it again. But I did get the gig. I wrote a travel column for a couple of years. And so out of that failed first visit, I got this poem. So it's called No One Knows What Happened to the Hittites. Every afternoon, he comes to the ruins to think. Romans, Hittites, Assyrians, powers mighty and powers long gone. And still he asks himself questions. Why no great art of his own yet, despite the decades of sweat and ambition? I'm a painter, he tells me before I ask, and I'm touring ruins, I say, to remember the ancient. Suddenly his wish to unmask himself seems very old, at least as old as these amphitheaters of the Romans, great sandy circles where gladiators could prove themselves. The painter and I stare at tall temples to some forgotten god, maybe the same one who ignored the Hittites' prayers and let them be eaten alive by the sea peoples, history's great floating mystery who condensed the civilization to rubble. The painter tells me the Hittites left vases galore, but only sketchy writings, that they were good people who were killed hastily. I think of how long it takes to make something and how quickly the Hittites faded into dust. Look, see how much is still standing, he smiles, motioning to the wide boulevards of the fat Persian king, the star-filled mosaics from the shops of Assyria, and the intricate art that lined the Greeks' public baths, all of it made by ancients, still whispering, we are here, we were here, don't stop asking what happened to us. We tried to tell you what to expect, but then everything just went bust. Yeah, and that was from Bikchaan, this famous dig. And I found myself just talking to a random guy, and it became a poem. So something else that I worked on these poems for 20 years, and it's never really thought it was going to be that long. So that line, how long it takes to make something really feels present to me now. Something that I thought about early on was, what does the prophet Isaiah look like? Well, who is he? What does he look like? It's so interesting because there's nothing about it in the book, nothing. And think about all the books we've read and how, you're taught in school, like, describe what someone looks like. Well, what if you don't? And so I found myself imagining early on, this poem is called Stubble. Stubble. Was Isaiah my favorite of the poets, bearded at the end? Did he ever rebel against himself with a razor, a foreign language, a move to a faraway continent like his descendants? Or did he just prophesy? In the imagined life, the next step is always a problem. Yeah, and I had a lot of problems working on this book, trying to figure out what was the next step. I didn't know it was going to be with me for so long. So I'm going to read a really short poem. It's the frontispiece of the book, first poem in the book. It's called The Book of Isaiah. And when I wrote it, it was in present tense. And then as time went on, I found myself, I'm sure all the writers in the room know this, you sort of reflect on what you've written before and you think about it. And so the tense changed. So here's a very short poem called The Book of Isaiah. The Book of Isaiah. For years, I wanted to be that angry and for it to be that beautiful. I loved the poetry of rage. And now, all I can remember are the hills. I can hear the fire in them, words shaking earth. Even a bull knows its owner, an ass its master. Hear heavens, give ear, O earth. And one of the things that really interested me about Isaiah was this concept of anger and anger being something beautiful. And something that I notice in our society, especially with everything that's been happening over the past year or 5 years, is that some people in our culture are allowed to be angry and some are not. And I was intrigued by, as a woman, you're not supposed to be super angry. I was intrigued by that. And I was also intrigued by the concept that in the book of Isaiah, anger is beautiful. And I thought that was so interesting that a just anger is a beautiful thing. It's not an ugly thing. So that was what that poem was about. And then as time went on, I found myself talking back to this ancient writer. And here's a poem like that. It's a question I get asked a lot. And it's, why don't you write in Hebrew? Okay. Why don't you write in Hebrew? Because I'm afraid of you, Isaiah. Afraid I'll hear the 6 wings, 2 to cover the face, and 2 to cover the legs, and 2 to fly. And I ask, how can I praise wings that cover feet and face? And how can I curse when you have already cursed with your carcasses of sleazy financiers, with your ugly and public deaths for those who squeeze the poor, the widowed, the temporarily weak? You ask me to compete head on with you, and I can't because I cannot hear in your presence. You thunder so in the space inside my left ear that I cannot forget you, even for the length of a line, the weight of a tear. And I am going to, where is it when you're looking for it? Yeah, and then this is a poem that I wrote when I was really feeling frustrated. I felt like no matter what I did, the words of Isaiah were in my mind, and it was hard to be me. You know, I thought about it so much. I think maybe writers in the room understand that sometimes your subject takes over your life, and I just really wanted to be myself. And so I wrote this poem at the height of frustration. I was working as a reporter. It was a time of great danger, and I just had it. And the poem is called Talking Back to Isaiah. Talking back to Isaiah. Oh man, let me be. I want to weep. I want to take my high-heeled sandals off and walk in the desert, my personal and terrible country of lust and poverty and want, my hot and punishing span of dust and blankness, dangers and ambush and wind. I have heard the throaty prophecy. Your words have snaked across centuries, crossed canyons and chasms, have gone from man to girl to woman. Your roar has reached its destination. Lie back now, lie back. Let your words float into the new mouth of the future, its air. You say your night of pleasure has been God flipped to terror, and I say, what was the night? Blackness, you say. I want to know if there even was a thing called night before God gave it to you. Was the night of pleasure you sing about the one of darkness and explosion, of bodies incinerated to bits, to heads and rolling parts, the most public of humiliations, the quivering dead tongue? Was it the night of the 7 years of waiting or the 7 years of knowledge? I know all about the 7 years of fatness, of good fields, and then the dryness of wheat, the thinness of the sad stalks. It was all dreamed of before my time. Dear guide, dear eternal rival, do not try always to walk into my dreams. Do not tell me you have seen this all before, that Assyria never dies, just returns in disguise, in hot breath instead of cold breath, in a new language of old violence. Oh, let me be. I am not the watchman to be beckoned at all hours to do your will. I cannot compete with your wild flips, your pyrotechnics of wolves, lambs, seraphim, wings beating into the face and the back and the air. I can only carry your words inside me, like swallowed diamonds smuggled into the crevices of the body for safekeeping. I can only work to hear what you say you heard and squint to see what you say you saw. I am taking my sandals off now. I am baring my feet to the desert. I am letting the hot sand burn the bottoms of what I will walk on for the rest of my life. Here, I have tried to walk with you, to walk sandaled and proper. I imagine the ancients sometimes. I can walk with the sway of a woman of 3,000 years ago, with her jeweled bangles and the heft of her long skirts, her hips, her hair. I can descend into the valleys of your ancient hills. I can stand in the outskirts of Jerusalem and tell myself I will be an outsider for the rest of my life, gazing toward the golden city. Now let me dress myself in the green leaves of the future. Go back to the books now and let me be. So, sort of breaking my own rule by reading a long poem, I try not to do that. And now, with your permission, I'm going to try something a little different with you. I am going to read a micro essay and then the poem that goes with it, and then I'm going to close. So, for folks who, I just want to get us back, I want to acknowledge that this is a Chicago series. And so I wanna, and also in addition to Sunday Salon, I think we're fortunate in Chicago to have the Chicago Review of Books. So if you wanna follow along, you can click if that's easier for you. So I'm going to read a very short, it's just 250 word essay, and then I'm gonna read a poem, and it's an Isaiah poem that takes place in Chicago. So here's the introduction. My sister used to live on Wellington Avenue. I would drive in from Iowa, search for free parking on nearby Cannon Drive, and stay the weekend. We sometimes walked around late at night, and I could hear people at all stages of love affairs conducting their lives in the street. Lakeview East happens to be both a Jewish neighborhood and a gay neighborhood. There are 3 synagogues, numerous rainbow flags, and businesses that cater to the LGBTQ community. Men holding hands with men is a frequent sight. Just east of Cannon Drive, there is a giant statue of writer John Wolfgang von Goethe. It was dedicated in 1913 for World War I and World War II. But the language of that dedication is a bit chilling because it describes Goethe as the mastermind of the German people. On the night this poem began, I walked past that monument. I heard Isaiah in my ears. I also heard a passage from James Baldwin's novel, Another Country, in which a saxophonist plays his heart out. And Baldwin tries to write that music in words with multiple permutations of the question, do you love me? Sometimes you is italicized, sometimes do, sometimes me. I was thinking about Baldwin's use of italics and how they do similar work to Isaiah's exhalations, ha, hoy, ha, which are often eliminated in translation. These musical directions control the volume, telling us what to feel and just maybe who to love. So breaking my own rule again, I hope that that's a little bit of just a background as in terms of how a poem happens. So what happened to me is I thought about Isaiah all the time, but contemporary writers were floating in. And so I just thought I would show you that and now read the poem, which takes place on Wellington Avenue in Chicago. Night on Wellington Avenue, Chicago. To Germany, from its German citizens, 1913. Another night, and I am a walker in the night, a wanderer reading. The Jewish neighborhood is graced by that odd monument, and the night is laced with Isaiah, with the juxtaposition of horrifying prophecy and soft wind. Is it all exile, all the cities of earth awake, and all the lovers of inexplicable cities walking, thinking if they just keep moving, it would all be calm. Just keep moving, and the body and the mind will exhaust into sleep. And I watch as men hold hands outside a bar, and women hope for salvation, their whole bodies one big ear listening, asking always that awful phrase, do you love me? Do you love me? And as the wind winds down and the bartender yells last call, I wonder if anyone is really in, or if all of us are always out, 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 wanderers like an unwanted prophet, an old man raving. Thank you all.
Oh, that was just wonderful. Thank you so much, Aviya. That was just really, really moving and just wonderful. I keep thinking of just anger or just anger.
Yes.
Right? So thank you again, Aviya, Shawn, Jeanie, and Nita, for your wonderful talents and your deep engagement. Let's give a round of applause for our readers this evening, everybody. So we have our Q&A next. We hope you can stick around for that. We would like to make it clear that questions from the audience are posed to the authors and answered by them only regarding this evening's reading.